The smallest tip in the room became the biggest lesson of a billionaire's life. The dinner rush had almost ended when it happened. Crystal glasses reflected the warm glow of chandeliers. Soft piano music drifted through the air. The kind of restaurant where a steak cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. Maya Johnson moved quietly between tables, balancing a tray with practiced ease. At 27, she had mastered the art of becoming invisible. Customers remembered the food. They remembered the view of Manhattan through the floor-to-ceiling windows. They rarely remembered the shy black waitress who kept everything running smoothly. And Maya preferred it that way. Across the dining room sat Ethan Callaway, a billionaire whose name appeared regularly on business magazine covers. At 39, he had built one of the largest technology companies in America. People admired him. Investors trusted him. Employees feared disappointing him. But tonight, he barely noticed the skyline beyond the glass. His attention remained fixed on the 8-year-old boy sitting across from him. Noah Callaway quietly pushed vegetables around his plate while staring at the tablecloth. Ethan watched him with concern hidden beneath his calm expression. Since losing his mother 3 years earlier, Noah had become quieter every year. The laughter that once filled their home seemed trapped somewhere neither of them could reach. "You should try the cheesecake," Maya said gently as she cleared their dinner plates. Noah glanced up for the first time all evening. "Is it good?" he asked softly. "The best in New York," Maya replied with a small smile. A faint smile appeared on Noah's face before quickly disappearing. Ethan noticed. It was the first time his son had smiled during dinner in weeks. Something about the waitress caught his attention. Not because she was loud. Not because she demanded recognition. Quite the opposite. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed untouched by the opinions of others. At a nearby table, 3 wealthy friends of Ethan's watched the exchange. One of them leaned forward with a grin. "I've got a challenge for you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What kind of challenge?" "Leave her a $1 tip." Ethan frowned. "Why?" "Because everyone has a breaking point. Let's see what hers is." The men chuckled. Ethan didn't join them. Normally, he disliked games like this. Yet curiosity lingered. Over the years, success had made him skeptical. Too many people acted one way in public and another behind closed doors. Too many smiles disappeared when money entered the conversation. His friend slid a crisp $1 bill across the table. "Come on. You're always talking about understanding people. Let's see what happens." Ethan looked toward Maya. She was helping an elderly couple near the window, listening carefully as if they were the only customers in the building. Then he glanced at Noah, who was quietly coloring on the back of a children's menu. Slowly, Ethan picked up the dollar bill. Minutes later, the check arrived. The total was $486. Ethan signed the receipt. Then he placed the single dollar on top and stood. Around the room, a few employees noticed immediately. One server froze. Another exchanged an uncomfortable glance with the bartender. Even Ethan's friends looked eager for the reaction. But Maya didn't react. She simply walked over, picked up the check, and stared at the $1 bill for several seconds. Then something unexpected happened. Her eyes moved past Ethan, past the table, past the receipt. They stopped on Noah, and a quiet smile appeared on her face. Maya carefully folded the dollar bill between her fingers. No anger crossed her face. No disappointment. No sign that she had even noticed the amount. Around her, however, the tension was impossible to miss. A young server near the bar shook his head. The bartender looked away uncomfortably. Even the manager standing near the host stand seemed ready to step in if things became awkward. But Maya simply slipped the bill into her apron pocket and continued gathering dishes as if nothing unusual had happened. Ethan noticed every second of it. He had expected surprise, maybe frustration, perhaps a forced smile hiding disappointment. Instead, there was nothing. The absence of reaction unsettled him more than any argument could have. As he reached for his suit jacket, Noah quietly stood beside him. The boy held his coloring page against his chest. Most of the crayons remained untouched. His eyes drifted toward Maya as she carried a tray toward the kitchen. For a brief moment their eyes met. Maya smiled. Noah smiled back. The expression lasted only a second before he looked down again. Yet it was enough for Ethan to notice. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the glass towers surrounding the restaurant. Luxury cars lined the curb. Drivers waited patiently. The evening felt perfectly ordinary. Yet Ethan found himself strangely distracted. His friends approached with satisfied grins. "Well?" one of them asked. "What did you think?" Ethan glanced back toward the dining room. "About what?" "The waitress." Another laughed. "You have to admit she hid it well." Ethan frowned. "Hid what?" "Being upset." The men exchanged knowing looks. Nobody likes being left $1. Ethan remained silent. Something about the conversation suddenly felt childish. He could not explain why. Perhaps it was the image of Noah smiling at Maya. Or perhaps it was the fact that she had refused to play the role everyone expected. Just as Ethan was about to leave, movement near the entrance caught his attention. Maya was walking toward them. Not quickly, not nervously, calmly. In her hand was a small white envelope. Ethan immediately assumed she had changed her mind. Maybe she wanted an explanation. Maybe she wanted to make a point. His friends straightened with anticipation. But Maya never looked at Ethan. Instead, she stopped in front of Noah and crouched slightly to meet his eye level. "This is for you," she said gently. Noah blinked in surprise. "For me?" Maya nodded. "You can open it later." The boy accepted the envelope carefully. "Thank you." "You are welcome." Her smile remained warm and sincere. Then she stood and walked away without another word. No speech. No lecture. No complaint. The entire exchange lasted less than 10 seconds. Ethan stared at the envelope in his son's hands. His friends looked equally confused. "What is that?" one of them asked. Noah shrugged. "I do not know." Ethan watched Maya disappear through the kitchen doors. Something told him this was not random. There had been intention in her eyes. Not judgment. Not resentment. Something else. Something he could not quite identify. Minutes later, father and son settled into the back seat of the waiting SUV. The city moved past the windows in streams of light. Noah turned the envelope over in his hands. It felt surprisingly heavy for its size. Ethan glanced at it several times before finally speaking. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Let us see what she wanted you to have." Noah carefully opened the envelope while the city lights drifted across the tinted windows of the SUV. Ethan watched from the opposite seat, pretending not to be curious. The boy slid a folded note from inside. A single dollar bill fell into his lap. It was the same dollar bill Ethan had left on the table. Noah unfolded the note. His small eyes moved slowly across the words. Then he read them aloud. "This dollar matters more than you think." Silence filled the vehicle. Ethan frowned. That was it. No accusation. No sarcasm. No demand for an apology. Just one sentence. Noah turned the dollar over in his hands. "What does she mean?" he asked quietly. Ethan looked out the window. "I am not sure." But the truth was that the sentence had already started working on him. It stayed in his mind during the drive home. It followed him into the elevator. It lingered as he tucked Noah into bed that night. The next morning, the words still had not left him. This dollar matters more than you think. Ethan spent his days solving complex business problems worth millions of dollars. Yet this simple sentence refused to leave him alone. By noon, curiosity finally won. He called the restaurant. "I would like to ask about one of your employees," he said. The manager immediately recognized the name. "Maya Johnson?" Ethan hesitated. "Yes." The manager smiled softly on the other end of the line. "She is probably the kindest person who works here." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "What do you mean?" The manager was quiet for a moment. 3 months ago, one of our kitchen staff members was about to lose his apartment. His daughter needed medical treatment, and he had fallen behind on rent. Nobody knew what to do. Ethan listened carefully. "What happened?" "Maya found out." The manager sighed. She worked double shifts for almost 6 weeks. Then she gave him nearly every extra dollar she earned. Ethan sat motionless. She never mentioned it?
No.
We only found out because the employee told us after everything was settled. The manager laughed softly. That is Maya. She does not talk about helping people. She just does it. After the call ended, Ethan stared at the skyline outside his office window. Hundreds of people worked beneath him. Thousands depended on decisions he made every day. Yet somehow, a waitress earning a fraction of what he earned in an hour had quietly changed someone's life without expecting recognition. Later that evening, Noah sat at the kitchen counter doing homework. The dollar bill rested beside his notebook. Ethan noticed it immediately. You kept it. Noah nodded. I think she wanted me to remember something. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat beside him. What do you think that is? Noah thought for several seconds. Then he looked up. Maybe that money is not important because of how much it is. Ethan remained silent. Maybe it is important because of what people do with it. The answer landed harder than Ethan expected. He glanced at the dollar bill. For the first time in many years, he found himself wondering whether he had been measuring value all wrong. The following Saturday, Ethan found himself standing outside the same restaurant long before dinner service began. He told himself he was there because of curiosity, because of a note, because of a conversation with Noah. Yet none of those explanations felt complete. Through the front window, he spotted Maya arranging silverware before the evening rush. She moved with the same quiet focus he remembered. No audience, no performance, just steady work. For several minutes, Ethan remained on the sidewalk watching people pass by. A businessman rushed toward a taxi. A family pushed a stroller down the block. Nobody noticed the billionaire standing alone outside a restaurant, questioning assumptions he had carried for years. Inside, Maya greeted a delivery driver with the same warmth she offered customers. She thanked the dishwasher for helping carry supplies. She paused to help an elderly hostess straighten a stack of menus. Small moments, easy to overlook. Yet Ethan noticed every one of them. When he finally stepped inside, Maya looked up. Surprise flashed briefly across her face before her usual calm expression returned. Good evening, Mr. Calloway, she said. Welcome back. There was no resentment in her voice, no hint of judgment. Ethan almost wished there had been. It would have been easier. Good evening, Maya. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ethan glanced around the nearly empty dining room. Are you busy? Maya smiled faintly. That depends on how many people decide they are hungry in the next 30 minutes. Ethan laughed quietly. It was the first genuine laugh he had experienced all week. Fair point. Maya finished adjusting a place setting. Is there something I can help you with? Ethan hesitated. In boardrooms, answers came easily. Confidence was second nature. Yet this felt different. Actually, yes. Maya waited patiently. I wanted to ask about the note. Her eyes drifted briefly toward the front window where evening sunlight painted golden reflections across the glass. The note was for Noah. I know. Ethan nodded. But I think it was also for me. Maya did not answer immediately. Instead, she picked up a folded napkin and placed it carefully beside a wine glass. Did it help? She finally asked. Ethan considered the question. More than I expected. Maya smiled. Then it served its purpose. The simplicity of her answer caught him off guard. No lecture. No attempt to prove a point. Just quiet certainty. Ethan glanced toward the kitchen. The manager told me what you did for one of your coworkers. Maya looked almost embarrassed. People talk too much. You worked extra shifts for weeks. He needed help. Most people would have told others about it. Maya shrugged gently. Why? Ethan found himself searching for an answer and realizing he did not have one. She looked at him with kind eyes. Helping someone is not supposed to be a performance. The words settled between them, softly, powerfully, and for the second time in less than a week, Ethan Calloway found himself speechless. The dinner crowd slowly began to fill the restaurant, but neither Ethan nor Maya seemed eager to end the conversation. For the first time in years, Ethan found himself speaking with someone who did not appear impressed by his success or intimidated by his reputation. It was strangely refreshing. Maya returned to preparing tables while Ethan remained nearby. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You just did," Maya replied with a faint smile. Ethan laughed again. "Fair enough. Why did you give the dollar back to Noah instead of me?" Maya paused for a moment. "Because children notice more than adults think." Ethan listened carefully. "And because children become the people they watch every day." The answer settled heavily in his mind. That evening, after leaving the restaurant, Ethan picked Noah up from a friend's house. During the drive home, the boy stared out the window while absent-mindedly turning the dollar bill between his fingers. He had carried it everywhere since receiving it. "Dad," Noah finally asked. "Yes. Do you think people can change?" Ethan glanced toward him. "Why would you ask that?" Noah shrugged. "Because everyone talks about successful people becoming successful. Nobody talks about becoming better." Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Children had a way of asking questions adults spent years avoiding. "I think people can change," he answered quietly. Noah nodded and looked back out the window. "Good. Why good?" Noah smiled softly. "Because I think you are trying." The words stayed with Ethan long after Noah had gone to sleep. The following week, business meetings filled every hour of his schedule. Billion-dollar negotiations, investor calls, expansion plans. Yet somehow his thoughts kept returning to the small restaurant downtown. More specifically, to a waitress who seemed to understand something about life that money could not teach. On Thursday afternoon, Ethan received unexpected news. One of his senior executives informed him that a scholarship program the company had supported for years was about to be discontinued due to budget restructuring. Normally, Ethan would have approved the recommendation without much thought. The numbers made sense. The decision was practical. Yet this time he hesitated. "Who benefits from the scholarships?" he asked. The executive appeared surprised. "Mostly low-income students." Ethan stared at the report. "How many?" "Approximately 140 each year." Silence filled the conference room. Then Ethan slowly closed the folder. "The program stays." Several executives exchanged confused glances. "Sir." Ethan looked around the table. "Not everything valuable appears profitable on a spreadsheet." The room fell silent. As the meeting ended, Ethan realized something unusual had happened. For years he had measured success through growth charts, revenue reports, and market share. But recently another question had entered his thinking. What difference does this make in someone's life? Late that evening, he found himself standing outside the restaurant once again. Through the window, he spotted Maya helping an elderly customer gather her belongings before carefully walking her to the door. No cameras. No audience. No recognición. Just quiet kindness. Ethan watched for several seconds before smiling to himself. Then he noticed something that stopped him cold. A framed photograph hanging behind the register had caught the light. And the face in that photograph was someone he recognized immediately. Ethan stepped inside without taking his eyes off the photograph. The frame hung near the register beside several pictures of restaurant staff and longtime customers. Yet one image stood apart. It showed a younger Maya standing beside an older woman whose smile carried the same warmth he saw in Maya every day. Ethan recognized the woman immediately. 5 years earlier, she had been the director of a community education foundation his company had once partnered with. Her name was Angela Johnson. He remembered her because she had refused a large publicity campaign attached to a donation. Most nonprofit leaders welcomed attention. Angela had politely declined. She had told Ethan something he never forgot. If helping people becomes a performance, eventually the performance becomes more important than the people. At the time, he had dismissed it as idealism. Now the words echoed in his mind with uncomfortable clarity. Maya noticed him looking at the photograph. "You knew my mother?" she asked. Ethan turned toward her. "Angela Johnson was your mother?" Maya nodded. A gentle smile appeared on her face. "She was." Ethan stared at the photograph for another moment. She was remarkable. Maya's expression softened. She was the best person I ever knew. There was no sadness in her voice, only gratitude. Ethan glanced back at the frame. What happened? Maya looked down briefly before answering. She became ill several years ago. Ethan remained silent. The treatments were expensive. Insurance covered some of it. Not all of it. The pieces began fitting together. The abandoned scholarship. The extra shifts. The quiet sacrifices. That is why you left school. Maya looked surprised. How did you know? Because people do not become who you are by accident. For a second, Maya said nothing. Then she laughed softly. My mother used to say something similar. Ethan smiled. What happened after that? Maya folded a clean napkin. I worked. Full-time. More than full-time. She smiled faintly. Life does not always wait until you are ready. Ethan knew that feeling better than most. After losing his wife, he had learned that lesson the hard way. The conversation paused as several new customers entered. Maya greeted them warmly before returning a few minutes later. Ethan remained near the register. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Leaving school? Maya thought carefully before answering. Sometimes. Her honesty surprised him. Most people would say no. Most people are afraid of sounding ungrateful. She looked toward the photograph again. I regret some things, but I do not regret being there for my mother. The answer carried a quiet strength that left Ethan searching for words. He looked at the woman in the picture, then at the daughter standing beside him. For the first time, he realized the note had never been about $1. It had never been about tipping. Had never been about proving a point. Maya had been trying to teach Noah something far more important. Value was not measured by money. It was measured by what people chose to do when nobody was watching. As Ethan stood there absorbing the thought, his phone suddenly buzzed. A message appeared from his assistant. It contained a report he had requested days earlier. The subject line made his heart skip. The Johnson Family Foundation. Attached beneath it was a single sentence. Foundation permanently closed after funding shortages. Final scholarship recipients. 23 students. Ethan stared at the screen. Then he slowly looked up at Maya. An idea had just entered his mind, and it was about to change far more than one life. That night, Ethan could not stop thinking about the message. 23 students. 23 young people whose opportunities had existed because Maya's mother believed education could change lives. Now the foundation was gone. The office lights of Callaway Technologies stretched across the city skyline as Ethan sat alone reviewing old records. Normally, he focused on future projections, market trends, expansion opportunities. But tonight, he found himself reading stories. One scholarship recipient had become a teacher. Another had started a small business. A third had become a nurse serving rural communities. The numbers on the page slowly transformed into faces. Lives, families, futures. Hours passed before Ethan finally closed the report. The next morning, he invited Noah to breakfast before school. They sat near the kitchen window while sunlight spilled across the table. The dollar bill still rested beside Noah's cereal bowl. You carry that thing everywhere now, Ethan said with a smile. Noah looked down at it. I do not want to forget. Forget what? The boy thought for a moment. That small things matter. Ethan nodded slowly. Then he slid a folder across the table. Noah looked confused. What is this? Something I have been working on. Noah opened it carefully. Inside were pages describing a new scholarship program. At the top was a simple title. The Angela Johnson Education Fund. Noah's eyes widened. You are bringing it back? Ethan smiled. I am thinking about it. Noah studied the papers. You already decided. Ethan laughed softly. Maybe. Is Maya going to know? The question caught him off guard. Eventually. Noah looked at the dollar bill again. I think her mom would like that. The words stayed with Ethan throughout the day. 3 evenings later, he returned to the restaurant. This time Noah came with him. The restaurant was busy. Conversations filled the room. Glasses clinked softly. Warm light reflected from polished wood and brass fixtures. Maya was helping a family near the window when she noticed them enter. A smile appeared immediately. "Good evening, Noah." The boy smiled back. Maya." Ethan noticed the difference. Weeks earlier, Noah barely spoke to strangers. Now he greeted her without hesitation. Maya guided them to a table. "The usual cheesecake recommendation still stands," she said. Noah laughed. "I was hoping you would say that." As she walked away, Ethan looked at his son. "You seem happier here." Noah shrugged. "People smile here." The answer seemed simple. Yet Ethan knew there was more to it. This place reminded Noah of something he had been missing. Kindness without conditions. Attention without expectations. Later that evening, after dinner ended and most customers had left, Ethan asked Maya if she had a few minutes. She agreed. Together they stood near the photograph of Angela Johnson. Ethan held the folder in his hands. Maya noticed immediately. "What is that?" she asked. Ethan looked at the photograph first, then at Maya. "Something your mother started." Maya frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Ethan slowly handed her the folder. As she opened it and read the title, her expression changed. Her eyes moved across the pages. Then she looked back up at him. For the first time since they met, Maya seemed completely speechless. For several seconds, Maya simply stared at the folder. The sounds of the restaurant seemed to fade into the background. Plates clinked softly. Conversations drifted through the dining room. Yet none of it reached her. Her eyes remained fixed on the words printed across the first page. The Angela Johnson Education Fund. Slowly, she turned another page. Then another. Detailed plans. Scholarship structures. Mentorship programs. College assistance grants. Everything her mother had once dreamed of building before funding shortages forced the foundation to close. Maya looked up at Ethan. "You did this." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan shook his head. "Your mother did this. I am only helping continue it." Maya lowered her eyes again. For the first time since Ethan had known her, she seemed overwhelmed. Not because of the money, not because of the scale of the project, but because someone had remembered. For years, people had remembered successful companies, successful investors, successful entrepreneurs. Very few remembered the people quietly helping others without recognition. "She would have loved this," Maya said softly. Ethan glanced at the photograph hanging nearby. "I think so too." Noah stood beside them, listening quietly. Then he stepped closer and pointed toward the picture. "Was she like Maya?" Maya laughed through moist eyes. "Hopefully." Noah shook his head. "Then she must have been amazing." The comment was so sincere that everyone smiled. Even Ethan felt something shift inside him. The restaurant manager approached after noticing the conversation. When he learned what the folder contained, he stood speechless for several moments. Soon a few longtime staff members gathered nearby. Word spread quietly. Nobody cheered. Nobody applauded. The moment felt too personal for that. Instead, people simply smiled. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others looked toward Angela's photograph with quiet respect. Later that evening, after the restaurant had closed, Maya remained behind. She sat alone at a table near the window with the folder open before her. Outside, Manhattan shimmered beneath thousands of lights. For years, she had carried the weight of unfinished dreams. Dreams placed on hold because life demanded something else. Yet tonight felt different. Not because every problem had disappeared. Not because everything had suddenly become easy. But because hope had returned. Ethan and Noah were preparing to leave when Maya stopped them near the door. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan nodded. "Of course." Maya looked directly at him. "Why did you really do this?" The question hung in the quiet room. Ethan considered it carefully. A few weeks earlier, he might have talked about opportunity, community impact, corporate responsibility. Tonight, none of those answers felt honest enough. He glanced toward Noah, then toward the dollar bill still sticking out of the boy's pocket. Finally, he smiled. "Because somebody reminded me that value and price are not the same thing." Maya stood silently for a moment. Then she nodded. She understood. As Ethan and Noah stepped into the cool evening air, neither noticed the small envelope Maya had placed inside the folder before closing it. It contained an old photograph, a handwritten note from her mother, and a message that would change everything once again. The following morning, Ethan opened the folder again inside his office. Tucked between the scholarship documents was a faded photograph of Angela Johnson standing beside a group of smiling students. Behind the picture rested a handwritten note. The paper had yellowed with time, but the words remained clear. Ethan read them slowly. Success is not measured by how many people know your name. It is measured by how many lives become brighter because you were here. He read the sentence twice, then a third time. For years he had chased growth, influence, and recognition. Yet somehow a woman he had met only briefly understood something he had spent decades missing. That evening, the official announcement was released. The Angela Johnson Education Fund would return with full funding. Students across the city would once again receive opportunities that had nearly disappeared forever. News outlets praised the initiative. Business leaders congratulated Ethan. Investors called it a brilliant public relations decision. But they were all wrong. This was not about publicity. It was about a lesson. A lesson that began with a single dollar. A week later, the restaurant hosted a small gathering. Former scholarship recipients attended. Teachers came. Families arrived carrying stories of opportunities that had changed their lives. Maya stood quietly near the back of the room, listening as others spoke about her mother's impact. Tears filled her eyes more than once. Across the room, Noah watched everything. When the evening ended, he walked over to Maya and handed her something. She looked down. It was the same dollar bill, carefully preserved inside a small frame. Beneath it was a plaque. The dollar that changed our lives. Maya looked at him in surprise. Noah smiled. I think it belongs here. For a moment, nobody spoke. Ethan stood beside his son, feeling a pride deeper than any business achievement he had ever experienced. Noah was smiling more now, talking more, living more, and Ethan finally understood why. Children do not learn from what adults say. They learn from what adults become. As the guests slowly left, Maya placed the framed dollar beside her mother's photograph. The two stood together under the warm restaurant lights. A simple picture.
Un simple dollar.
Yet both carried the same message. Value is never determined by size, only by purpose. Ethan looked at the display one last time before heading home with Noah. He had entered that restaurant believing he was testing someone else. In the end, he discovered the truth. The person being tested had been him all along. And the quiet waitress he underestimated never raised her voice. She simply raised the standard.